You're listening to Artistic Finance, show 180. On today's show, we talk with lighting designer Josh Hutchings. We discuss not having a financial plan, making a financial plan with the help of professionals, and compound interest and various other taboo financial topics. This is the third of 4 live recordings we did at LDI. Now, there was no live audience for this one because we did it early in the morning before most people get to the convention center. I also didn't tell anybody about it, but this is one of my favorite episodes we recorded because I didn't know Josh that well. And so everything he talks about, I'm learning as he says it. So I hope you enjoy this as much as I did. Now, links to Josh's details and everything that we mentioned can be found in the show notes or at artisticfinance.com/180. Without further ado, let's get to the show.
You are listening to Artistic Finance, where we help creatives learn about the business of show business.
Welcome and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Ethan Steimel. We are recording this December 9th at LDI in Las Vegas. And today I welcome lighting designer Josh Hutchings. You're a lighting designer, right?
I am, and I guess that's what they call me.
Amazing. Okay, all right. So can you tell us about yourself?
Well, I turn lights on and off for a living. And, well, truth be told, I tell people to turn lights on and off for a living. I don't actually get to turn them on and off anymore. I predominantly work in multi-camera television, predominantly game shows, shiny floor shows. But I still keep my feet in some concert touring, some corporate. So basically, I'm very fortunate that I'm not really pigeonholed into any one genre. Although my predominant, what takes up most of my time is working in television.
And did you say where you're based?
I am based in Burbank, California. Although I do shows all over the world, predominantly in LA, New York, Atlanta, basically anywhere where the tax incentives send corporations and production companies to do our shows.
All right. What is a live event that you like to experience as an audience member?
I am still a 13-year-old theater geek at heart. So I always enjoy going to theater. Obviously, I enjoy going to concerts and to see friends work. Yeah, I guess that's pretty much for live events. That's kind of where I go.
All right, that checks out because we met last night. And it was like half TV people, half theater people.
Fair, yeah.
So that makes sense. And then also before we started recording here, you were talking about Don Holder and Bradley King and a bunch of theater people.
Lot of definitely. I'm a huge fan of our Broadway brethren and sisters who get to do that level of detail and beautiful work.
Yeah.
As opposed to, most of the time in television, we have a much faster pace where we have to just move very quickly and trust your first instincts and move on. And obviously serving many masters and lots of opinions that you try to make it all work. And at the end of the day, you want to, create a product that you're proud of. And at the same time, ultimately, you're being an at-will employee and you're being hired to do a show and you're trying to fulfill many people's view of what the show should look like.
Yeah. Well, that brings up a question, which talking about like the finesse that can happen maybe in theater versus faster paced television. Drafting wise, I just remember when I first saw TV drafting, It tends to be a little looser, to me. Do you draft?
I usually do a first pass of a draft and to get the concepts and these if there's a specific angles with cameras and where I need key lights and how to manipulate it, I will do a first pass, but that is basically just a detailed note session that I will send to much better drafters than I am. I use Trevor Gooch out of New York, does a lot of my drafting, and a few other people that I'll use to make it pretty.
Yeah.
Well, and to XREF with the production, with the production designer and art directors. So to have all of that in the one collaboration where when the sets come in and changes, and also in television, you have to be a little more flexible with the capabilities of when you get into the venue, the rigging department will have to shift things.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that it's more loose than any of the other genres, but I think it's definitely a situation where you have to be flexible, and you're going to call a lot of things on the fly as you're loading in and changing things. Sets will all of a sudden show up 12 feet taller than they were shown on a plan, and you just have to deal with it.
Yeah. And when you say you do the first pass, is that like on is it really actually notes, or are you like starting the draft and like plotting something out?
It depends on the project, but a lot of sometimes it's literally just going into markup on a PDF and dropping circles and squares. Other times I'll go into Vectorworks and actually draw out the first set of plans and the truss layout and then hand that off to them, and they'll make it with real truss and manipulate it and make it something that the gaffer and the production team can actually use, as opposed to my willy-nilly sketches.
Yeah. Amazing. All right. Are you good, bad, or neutral with money?
I want to say that I'm good, but the reality is I'm probably neutral. I definitely have bad habits. I'm a believer of the realization that we all live just within our means. That there's at a situation where the more money you make, somehow you spend more money. I think no matter how much money you make, you always come to the end of the month and go, where did it go?
Right. That is amazing.
And from the beginning of my career, where I didn't make hardly any money, to where I am now, where I make a very comfortable living, you still somehow seem to collect expenses that will often lead you. So I think that's neutral, but the reality is it's probably horrible, because when you start making a really good living in this industry, you should be prepared for a lot of the eventualities that are going to come. But the reality is, no, we always just live within our means.
That sounds so accurate, because it's like the work expands or contracts depending on how much time you have.
Right.
And that's totally right.
And especially in the sense of, as an entertainment community over the past, 4 or 5 years, obviously we've had massive fluctuations in the availability of work. So I've had mentors in the past say that you need to have 6 months of money.
Yep.
So if everything dries up and you're like, well, when is the world ever going to just stop for 6 months? Hello, 2020. I was on a show in March of 2020. We had loaded in a show. We were doing our test shows, and we were about to start shooting on March 13th of 2020.
Yep.
And I went to lunch with some vendors, and we came back from lunch and we're told, go home, come back in 2 weeks. We're going to take 2 weeks off to flatten the curve. Next thing you know, no one's working for the next 4 months.
Yep.
And TV was very lucky in the sense that we were essential workers in the state of California. Obviously, the world needed entertainment and television shows and whatnot. So we went back to work around the 4th of July. And that was probably one of the busiest periods I've ever had in my life, is because there was so much need for content. We got very, very busy and had to deal with the testing and the protocols and you name it. And not only that, but the financing of the shows became a very different thing. I think a lot of the shows were budgeting somewhere in the ballpark, don't quote me, but roughly $100,000 a week.
Yeah.
Just in COVID expenses, just to allow us to have the functionality of shooting television. So that theory of like, well, let's have 6 months of work, and all of a sudden we get through COVID, we come back, we have a very, very busy period. And then comes the writer strikes and SAG strikes, and that shuts down television. And then, okay, well, once the writer strike is done, then we're going to get back to work. Well, no. Now we have the IATSE contract negotiation, and that's going to take time. And okay, well, once the IATSE done, we're going to go back to work. And then it's well, now the Teamsters have to do their contract. Okay, well, great. So that gets negotiated, but then we're going to get busy, and now we're wondering why we're not busy.
Yeah.
Where the dynamics of how entertainment works and in television specifically of the studios just aren't turning stuff on yet. And no one necessarily understands why. And, there's definitely entertainment companies that are sending shows to Ireland, and, Fox Television sends a lot of their stuff over to Ireland now. And, a lot of stuff comes out of LA and shoots, in other states because they're chasing tax incentives. So, LA is, as an entertainment hub of television, is kind of dwindling. So it's a little, everyone's hurting a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Let's wind up before your career. Growing up, did you have a good financial example?
I want to say yes, but the reality is probably not. My parents always struggled with money. There was always seemed to be a lack of money and planning and anything else. So I don't necessarily think that I had much of a good example of how to save or how to manage or prepare for retirement. There just wasn't a lot of financial instruction when it comes to what my parents had. I just don't think there was a lot. I think what I've learned from on money and everything else has more been through mentors than I think my parents.
Yep, that checks out. I feel that's not an uncommon story. This will be like episode 180 or something. And I want to say that's a similar answer to probably more than 50% of people. The ones who do actually the ones that do have a good example, I'm like, you're so lucky.
It is. I mean, you hear the stories of what are the statistics like when 70% of people who win the lottery end up bankrupt within 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, just
because they didn't grow up with money. They didn't understand money, and all of a sudden, just because you have it, there's no education in how to keep it.
Yeah.
And that's a struggle that I think a lot of people have is. Well, again, like we said earlier, it's like you always live just within your means.
Yeah. Well,
no matter how much money you have. Like,
right.
I think that's kind of a scary thing to have.
Yeah. But it's all a game, and everyone's like, oh, capitalism, blah, blah, blah. And that's fine, however you feel about it. But it's like, it's a game. And if you learn how to play that game, that's good for you. But if you don't want to take the time and energy to learn the game,
right,
then.
No, and I think in general you need money to make money.
Yeah.
Like I think there's a barrier of entry when it comes to finance that I think certainly if you have money to invest, then you do well.
Yeah.
But people who are struggling to just make ends meet and put their kids through school and pay for food and rent and electricity and gas. If you're struggling to survive, then you definitely have an outlook of how can I ever reach those levels. If you don't have money, you can't make money. If you're only living within that means, then it becomes a complication.
Yeah. At the start of your career, what did your finances look like?
I was very fortunate. I started working for a theme park in Anaheim when I was 18. Or 17. Don't talk to HR about that. And I was very fortunate that I was able to make a very good living very early in my career, where there were a handful of us younger technicians that were working there that my roommate and I were kind of known as the disposable income twins. Where you're making a very good living and we were incredibly fiscally irresponsible. He went out and got his pilot's license, and I bought motorcycles and cars, and we went on crazy trips. And the reality of you look back on those early years and went, what the hell didn't I invest in IRAs?
I don't want to age you, but also, how old are you? Or
I am, I think, 46.
46. Okay. All right. So wait, you were saying, okay. The Roth IRA wasn't invented until 1996.
which was the year I started working for
Oh,
Disney.
darn it. You could have
So,
done it. You
yeah,
could have
so
done it.
I absolutely, you look back and go, dude, $5,000 into a Roth IRA and you would have been golden. Like you could have retired by now. But
Oh, man. Wait.
just the stupidity again, I think there's a lack of education. I don't think you look at public education and, I don't remember anything about my public education that taught me how to balance a checkbook, let alone retirement planning or having anything else. And, I was stupid and 18 and making a very good living. And I spent every penny I got.
Yeah. You're in Burbank now. Have you been in California your whole life?
Yeah, I grew up in the Inland Empire in the 909. I went on tour. I started going on tour when I was about 18. Did a bunch of Disney tours, mall tours. Ended up moving to Anaheim to be closer to work. Got to work with some really great designers as a programmer, working at the park, and eventually moved my way into television, and then moved up to Burbank, and have been there pretty much ever since.
Amazing.
Somewhere in Southern California, in the valley, so to speak.
Yeah. Do you worry or think about money on a daily basis?
I don't think a day goes by where at some aspect money is on the table. Like I think there is between running a small business and having to do billing and bookkeeping, planning. I own a bunch of lighting gear and so there's payments and leases and loans. In addition to the art of working in entertainment, there is at least a minimum of a few hours a day that I have to spend on the economics of the industry.
Do you have any debts, like medical debt or credit card debt, mortgages?
I carry a bit of credit card debt. Predominantly, I will pay off my credit cards monthly. I'm fortunate that I never went to college. Mm-hmm. I don't have that level of student loans. But I do have some business loans. I have, during COVID, I took out an EIDL loan. I did SBA loans. I've done, and then I have gear lease loans. I learned a couple years ago that debt is not necessarily bad. Uncontrollable debt and stupid debt is very bad. But taking out a loan to advance the business is not necessarily a bad place to be. And the return is significant enough that it makes sense.
Yeah, amazing. You mentioned EIDL.
That was the SBA during COVID.
That same thing.
That was the emergency loan where I think it was like a 2.5% loan that you can get based on a percentage of your annual income as a company. So it's basically just a very low interest loan from the SBA.
Have you ever used a budget? And we're sort of bridging the gap between personal and business because, connected. So I guess you can answer it whether personally or through the business.
I don't think I've ever actually written out a budget, but I'm very conscious of my monthly spend between the loans and payments and alimony and all of those things. I think I definitely know where the money is going every month, but I don't think I've ever sat down to I'm going to spend this much on electricity. I'm going to spend this much on this and this. At a certain point, there's just a monthly, you just get comfortable with, here's the typical monthly payments.
What is a good financial thing that you have done that maybe other people could learn from or emulate?
I can't recommend enough talking to good financial planners and talking to professionals who do it for a living. It's kind of an intimidating thing because you're basically walking in and pulling your pants down and saying, here I am, and this is what I have, and here's my money. And in society, it's almost uncouth to talk about money. Mm-hmm. But to be able to just open yourself up and to be able to say, look, I want to retire at some point. I want to be able to have some form of financial independence, that at a certain point, you just have to get to a point where you need to go talk to a financial planner and you need to have a plan, because left to my own devices, I would end up penniless. And
Yep. The reverse of that, is there any bad financial thing you've ever done that you would say, don't do this?
I don't know. I mean, I look back on the stupidity of my financials, in my 20s and early 30s, where before I realized that life actually goes on after a certain age and that I'm not going to die at 35. Mm-hmm. And I might actually need to plan something moving forward. I think the worst thing that I did is just to not understand a plan. The realization of you're working, you're thriving, you're doing well, and then the realization of that, God forbid you get hurt or come into whatever industry shutdowns, to not have that ability to be able to ebb and flow and to be able to work within it and to always be just at the edge of what you're capable of. I think that was probably the worst thing I ever did, is just not realize that, hey, this is a career and you got to plan for it and you got to make it work.
You mentioned getting financial planners advice. Did you do that at a certain age? Just because you mentioned 35, you aren't going to die at 35.
I think it was about 35 when I started talking to financial planners and accountants and life insurance policies. I have twin daughters who were born right about the time I was turning 35, starting to talk about estate planning and life insurance. And now I can't just be an irresponsible stagehand and
yep.
And I'm just going to go buy a new motorcycle this month. And all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, I'm going to have kids and I'm responsible for other human beings beyond just me and my wife. And that was the big turning point of having kids and going, oh, I got to really actually grow up now.
Yeah. That's amazing. I have a 20-month-old and I was 35 when he was born. So I feel like
you especially I had twins. So I'm holding these two beautiful little baby girls and going, oh my God, I have to get my shit together.
Yeah. Amazing. How do you get jobs / find work?
I would say that work begets work. I think as a general rule, you're only as good as your last gig. I think what most people don't understand, especially in the entertainment business, is that this is a relationship business. So you are going to develop relationships throughout your career and different phases of your career. I'm very fortunate that I get to work with some executive producers, showrunners, directors that, I've worked with for decades now. And I think you develop those relationships either through university or professional career. Entertainment is at its heart almost a pack mentality. Mm-hmm. That you travel in teams. You develop those relationships, and there's producers that will hire me on almost every show they do. And there's others that I'm their backup. There's, so you develop those relationships, and, when things start getting slow, then you start reaching out. And I am the worst at the cold call of reaching out to new people. Mm-hmm. But I am very much in the effort of, if I haven't seen someone in a while, let's go to lunch. And you just put your name in the mix. The worst thing to be is out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
So I think that's my primary way of getting work is just reinforcing and reinvigorating relationships. Because there's a great deal, there's a lot of us. I mean, there's a lot of lighting designers, there's a lot of production designers, and there's whatever else. And to be able to get that work is a lot of times especially in television, the studio will put people up, the production company can put people up for the job. Directors have a say in who they want to work with. Producers have a say in who they want to work with. So you have, anywhere from 4 to 6 entities that are all vying for who they want to design the show. So it's really just a relationship game.
Yeah.
And you're going to win some, you're going to lose some, but really it's just a matter of trying to maintain that network of relationships.
This question is, since I talk to a lot of theater people, so I know how sort of like the design team is put together and all this, and assistants and stuff like that. So this question is geared that way, but maybe it works for you, so you answer how you want. But like working with assistants or other designers or other people on your team, do you ever help negotiate their pay?
For the most part, I will negotiate my pay, and then typically my gaffers and chief lighting technicians in the television and film world manage the rates and negotiations for the crew. Oftentimes, I will negotiate the rate for my programmers in television. So as far as assistants go, that's typically done. If I were to have an associate or a lighting director that working for me, more often than not, they're either working for me directly or it will be negotiated through production.
Got it. Okay. So you do yours, your programmers. Gaffer does their own.
Typically,
and
the gaffer will manage the crew and the crew down. And then obviously if there's an issue, then I can help get involved and Bigfoot it. But for the most part, that's I let them manage. I don't like to get involved in the sense of I hire the department head, which is typically the gaffer or lighting director, and then I let them manage down. I don't like to micromanage that level, but typically I hire the gaffer and I hire the programmer.
You mentioned your first job was at a theme park in Anaheim. How did you
working for the mouse?
Yeah. How did you get that first job and how much did it pay?
When I got hired in March of 1996, I just had open application through there. At the time, I want to say that it was in person. I don't think the internet was necessarily, I don't think there was a portal or anything that I did. And as far as, there was no LinkedIn application for Disney yet. So I think I pretty much, if I remember correctly, I just basically showed up at the casting center and put in an application. When I got hired, I believe I got paid, it was $16,005 an hour.
Okay. 005.
$16,005. $16 and half a cent, I believe, was the starting rate for technicians at that time.
Amazing. I love it. All right. How did you get your latest job and how much did it pay?
The recent jobs, so there's different dynamics now as a designer. So there's the ability to, depending on the job, you can package the show where you're the middleman that's negotiating with all the rental rates and you become the vendor. But in general, as a lighting design, on a television show I've done recently, there's a design fee, which is about $15,000 typically, $15,000 to $20,000, which covers all of your pre-production costs, your drafting costs and everything else. And then you have your day rate. So anytime you're on site is anywhere from $1,200 to $1,800 a day. And
then that pre-production, when you submit a bid or an invoice, if you do, is it like line itemed out of like, this is going to be for drafting, this is going to be for, or is it just sort of like, there's your design fee? It's a flat cost, and that covers all of the costs that I incur. So either, depending on the size of the show, I'll draft it or I'll bring in a drafter depending on the level of collaboration. So obviously the drafting costs come out of that design fee. Any pre-production time, site surveys, less any travel. But if it's in town, I don't typically charge for a site visit if it's only going to be half an hour or an hour. But that's all basically included into the design fee. Got it. Okay. So they don't micromanage you either. No. On more theatrical productions, they will have a tendency to want to see how the cost breakdown is done. I'm currently working on a tour
that's more theatrical in nature, and that executive producer it wants to see where the money is going. But that is also in the sense of that there is a fee that is inclusive of the entire production of mounting the show. And we've been in production for probably a little over 14, 16 months now. So there's previs, there's, my programmers, drafters, digital team, Unreal Engine technicians. So it's a bigger scope and everything else. So the denomination is a higher for the fee. But that is inclusive of the entire lighting department pre-production. They're a little more cautious on that, and they want to see how the breakdown is done. And the payments are set out in a fee schedule based on timelines and milestones. But at each phase, that has to be justified. And I show the invoices and I show everything else to show them that it's not just, I'm just going to make this much money. And they want to see a little bit more reporting on that.
Okay. So it's like, here's the previs that we were talking about, and
right.
here's the invoice going along with that.
We spent 15 days in previs this month, and that's, $1,000 a day for the suite and the console, and, $500 a day for the previs technician and that aspect. And then my programmer has their rate, and they're making, close to they're making $1,000 a day or whatever it is. And all of that gets mounted back to show them that I'm not just blowing their money.
Yeah.
So that when we do go over budget, because we're always going to go over budget on a show like on this type of show, that when we go back and ask for more money, it has to be justified.
Yeah. Yeah. I gotcha. Which job of yours has been most well compensated?
I would say, over time, I do syndicated game shows, and that's basically 60 days of work. Okay. over 3 months plus a design fee. So that adds up. A lot of the other game shows get your design fee, and we're only in the studio for 3 weeks. It just depends on the project and how much time is associated. I don't know where I would say that one genre necessarily pays a lot more than the others.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're all relatively ballpark. Again, I'm a 13-year-old, theater geek at heart, and I would love to do more theater, but it just comes into the time frame of where am I going to have that block of time,
right?
To be able to do it. Where typically if I have a block of time available, I want to spend it with my kids because I work too much as it is.
Yep.
So you get into it going, well, I'm going to do TV so that I can afford to do theater, and then you just never do theater.
Yeah, you don't have time,
and you wish you did. And I'm jealous of my friends and peers that work in theater as a full-time endeavor. I'm jealous of the work that they get to do, because I feel like sometimes the TV side is more minutia than art.
You mentioned a syndicated game show for 3 months, I said. Does that mean are you locked in only doing that game show for 3 months, or are you designing other things at the same time?
No, I'm typically designing multiple shows at the same time.
So you're not on site.
I'm very fortunate. So I get to work on, I'm the lighting designer for Let's Make a Deal and Price is Right. So Price is Right moved to a new studio for the first time in 50 years. And we designed an entire lighting rig for the production company, and it's all bought by the production company. So it's now a sitting show that is basically established. Between those two shows in the one studio, they basically work almost year round now. So between those two shows, they both have to produce 180 episodes a year for the daytime syndicated, and then they both do prime times as well. So that essentially is a year-round endeavor. I have a team of people that I can put into place, and when I get another show, I can bounce out. I have an incredible team of lighting directors and lighting designers that can come in and cover for me to be able to go out for 2 or 3, 4 weeks and go do another show and then come back.
Got it. Amazing. Okay. Do you have an entity, corporation, LLC, or are you just a sole proprietor?
I have Illumination Advocates, which is a California S Corp. And then I have FFS Lighting, which is a Nevada LLC.
So Nevada, you just do enough work in Nevada? Or?
The Nevada LLC was based on a previous business partner. And then, I'm within the next year, I'll be making my primary residence in Nevada.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, since we're in Vegas, welcome to Nevada.
Welcome home.
And did it have anything to do with LDI always being in Vegas? Is this really what pushed you to take up residency?
Well, I'm old enough to remember when LDI used to bounce between Orlando and Vegas.
Yeah.
No, I don't think LDI
kidding.
Being in.
I'm just being silly because
I'm actually a fan. I mean, I understand the dynamics of multi-year contracts with the convention center and why we're always in Vegas, but I actually miss that. Early days was, I think it was in Phoenix for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of think LDI would be more dynamic to actually go on the road and, 1 year do it in New York and, do it at the Javits or whatever else or go back to Orlando. I think it would be interesting to get onto the East Coast and I think allow some people to be able to attend that can't necessarily afford to or due to jobs or kids or whatever reason makes it a little harder to get to Vegas for the weekend.
Yeah. I'm sure Ellen has heard it 1,000 times, that sentiment.
I'm sure. Well, I mean, the F1 being in Vegas that shifted LDI away from, Thanksgiving to into December. And now, I mean, even still, this year, the past 2 years, it's been the Sunday, Monday, Tuesday.
Yeah.
Which is a whole different dynamic. And I don't know if I'm sure they've got the reporting of it. I don't know if that's better or worse for the corporate side of entertainment where you have staff and salaried people that can attend. Obviously, I think one of the best beneficiaries of LDI is students. I don't know how that if that's better or worse for them in the sense of being able to be here during the week.
Yeah.
And can they take time off of school and justify the travel and whatever else? I think that
actually, I've seen a lot of students here, but I also had that teaching year in Phoenix. And before I left, I was like, everyone go to LDI next year. And 6-7 of those students are here. But it's right over finals. So it was one of those things where I was like, in August, you have to tell all your professors, hey, look, I'm going to want to go do this because it's. I think
if you're going to school for theater, then I think there or entertainment, I think there's definitely. I would hope that the professors would allow for that because I think it's critical to at that level in your career. I think I'm sure the manufacturers would hate me saying this, but LDI for me, and I think a lot of upper level professional people in the industry, it's more about the relationships and than the actual gear or learning what's new and out there.
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate that I get to work with the manufacturers, so I usually know what's coming up, and there's no surprises at LDI that much anymore that a lot of people working at a professional level don't already know. You know what Verilight's coming out with, what Chauvet and Elation and all of the Roby and all of the amazing vendors that we have and manufacturers. There doesn't seem to be a. Oh, and by the way, there's also this thing.
Right.
I think but more important is the connections, the personal relationships and catching up and walking the floor and seeing someone that you did a show with 10 years ago and like, oh my God, I haven't seen you in forever. And that, I think that's the best dynamic to have. And really, I think the reason that I have always continued to come to LDI was the relationship side. And to catch up with old friends and drink way too much and stay out until 7, 8 in the morning.
Yeah.
Which is probably why my voice is about 3 octaves lower than it should be right now.
Yeah. So we'll just say that Josh and I were at the Tiki Bar last night with a bunch of other people. And I said, hey, you want to do this interview at 9 a.m.? And I left the bar at a responsible 11:15 p.m. And everybody was saying, why are you leaving? Why are you leaving so early?
Oh.
And so I see Josh. Josh showed up here at 8:30 in the morning early. That was a surprise to me. And he said, I got back to the hotel at 7 a.m.
It was a night.
So
I think one of the last things I remember was we were FaceTiming Oscar Dominguez, who's an incredible lighting designer who does The Voice and a lot of other shows. He happened to be up for some god awful reason at 4:30 in the morning, and we were at the bar and FaceTiming, and I'm like, "What the hell are we doing awake?"
yeah,
Yeah, no, that's
ridiculous.
That's the fun part of LDI.
And I should have known because Josh showed up with 2 coffees, and I thought, well, that's weird. Why'd he bring me a coffee? And then I realized,
no. I hate to break it to you that I'm very selfish in that sense. I'm going to need this.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, I will say we did like 10 pre-LDI mini episodes with Ellen, and every single person, vendor, attendee, whatever, all said, like, I was like, what are you excited about at LDI? And it was like seeing people. Nobody said anything like, I want to see the new Viper or anything like that.
Yeah, the gear is the gear. There's a lot of manufacturers now. You go back to the 90s and early aughts where there was really only 3 or 4, manufacturers at a professional level that's doubled or tripled. And the reality is they're all making incredible product.
Yeah.
So there's no longer the quote unquote DJ companies anymore. Like everybody's working at a very great and a real just incredible level. But because of that, I think there's a tendency that there's a high level of similarity between the manufacturers. They all have a small, medium, large format profile or a wash light. And so you kind of get to the point where over the past several years, it's incremental evolution. It's rare that you see something and go, wow, that's incredibly imaginative.
Yeah.
And that's an incredible fixture. And I can't wait to see how that's going to get used. Those are a little more far between. A lot of things is just an incremental. And again, I'm a geek. So I think my favorite thing is to find the little gadgets.
Amazing. All right. I'm going to circle back to finance.
Okay.
W-2 versus 1099 income. What percentage of each are you getting each year?
I want to say about 6 or 7 years ago, my accountant got incredibly unhappy with me because I had, I think, 40 something W-2s. And that's where my accountant basically tried to fire me. and said, you are forming an S corp and you will be loan out and you will do 1099 and you will be an independent contractor because I'm just not going to import all of these W-2s. And it was really a matter of my accountant going, you're insane if you think I'm going to spend a week on just your account.
So does that mean you had to get somebody else to do the S corp financing, or did they do that, or accounting?
I had a corporate attorney that ended up setting up the S corp in California, and that was just essentially, it was just a convenience because they had a service that would actually be in Sacramento in California and go in and turn in the paperwork. And just for speed and efficiency, I hired that attorney to just to manage that aspect of getting it set up.
Okay.
Making sure the articles of incorporation are correct and making sure to be able to register with the IRS and the state and all of those entities. Because again, I'm a high school dropout who manages 2 companies and have no business degree and have had to learn through professional assistance. The fact that I own 2 businesses is just a mechanism of basically tax liability and accounting. So ultimately, at the end of the day, my accountants make a good living off of me because I don't. And they've had to teach me bookkeeping and they've had to teach me things to make their job easier. So having a good relationship with an accountant and a tax attorneys and whatever else they've forced me to have better practices in managing and cataloging and, here's QuickBooks and here's all of the expenses that you had last year. Let's talk about how to categorize them so that it doesn't take me a year and a half to do your taxes.
Is all the income you're getting going into the corporation, and then you're getting paid through the corporation? Is that how it's working?
Between the two corporations, yes. Most of it is done as a W-2 from the entity. So the corporation, the entity, the business entity, does all of the billing to productions and to clients, and then I manage on the back end after expenses. I will fill out I have a base salary, and then I do bonuses and to close out the year.
Got it. Okay.
And that basically accounts for, I don't know how it is in other states, but obviously California wants their pound of flesh quarterly.
Yeah. They're famous for that.
So that helps manage that. So in addition to the W-2, which offsets that, I still have to pay quarterlies and everything else to run the business.
Got it. So each of the businesses is paying a quarterly taxes.
Correct.
Yep. Okay.
No one teaches you this until you're into it.
No,
no. That's why I think like what you're doing and your projects and what you're doing with these type of things is important, because no one teaches this. Like no one, there's still that faux pas that people have a problem talking about financing and even amongst friends and other designers, like people are like, what do you charge?
Right. No, really. And that's what I'm always saying.
And
just ask people.
Yeah. And well, part of it is also as you move up in your career, you don't want to flaunt it. Like I know up and coming designers that aren't going to be able to get the same rates that I'm getting.
Yeah.
And to manage those things. And that's all, part of the evolution of growing through your career. But there's still that in essence, like people are very skittish about talking about money.
Yeah.
I think more people are willing to talk about sex and their relationships and far, far more intimate details of their life. But God forbid you tell somebody what's in your IRA.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no. And you had mentioned earlier, like meeting with a financial planner felt like pulling your pants down, just be like, let's expose it all.
It is. It's more intimate than the first time you're with a new partner. Like it is. That doesn't seem to have as much of you're able to compartmentalize that in some way.
Yeah.
But it's a very intimate thing to talk about finances and to talk about planning and to talk about it, because you're financially, to expose yourself like that is a weird thing that just culturally, I don't know if it's different in other countries or communities, but it's definitely a hard discussion. And I whatever you think about capitalism, I think there's definitely an employer class that doesn't want you talking about that. Like, I think there's a combination of that it's on the best interest of those hiring people to not have people discuss it. I mean, but that's you get all those the wage discrepancies between, I don't know about sex or between men or women or age or any other way that you split up the pie. Why can't we talk about these things?
Right.
Personally, we limit ourselves, and that it's just really uncomfortable, especially when you find out that you're either on the high end or the low end.
Yeah. Right.
I think people,
I think that's good.
I think politics or anything, I think that's a thing.
Yeah.
Anyone who's on the extremities, you feel guilty that you make more money than your friends.
Right.
Or you feel ashamed that you're making less. Like, I think that's a really weird dynamic that we have culturally. We would all be better off if we could just have open and frank conversations about finances.
Well, and that's sort of the reason why I have this podcast, is because I think it's so much easier for other people to just listen to other people talk about it than to have the conversations themselves. So I feel like that's why it's important to sit here and talk about it, because all the things you just explained. All right. So do you have a retirement plan? And if so, what are all the parts of it? And I have a list of here I can read. Like, do you have this? Do you have this? Do you have this? If you want me to.
I think anybody under the age of 50 has a basic understanding that Social Security is just not going to be there for them.
No, don't say that. I feel like I'm the only person. I mean, I agree with you. I understand.
I mean, it's a social safety net and everything else. One of those things where I think
it is going to be here. It is going to be here. That being said, even if it is here, it's not enough to live on.
No.
That being said, some people do.
It is literally the basic net to catch you. But no, so I have IRAs, I have investments, I have long-term, short-term, different levels of risk. I definitely have a life insurance policy, multiple. So I have term as well as permanent. So those have different payout schedules. Within the businesses, I own a high level of gear value that will eventually get sold off. So it's pretty broad across the spectrums of different type of setups. So in addition to IRAs, you have there's pre-tax, there's post-tax investments. There's
Okay. And are you in any unions or anything like that? Any pensions?
I'm IATSE 600 as a lighting director, lighting designer. I still have my IATSE 728, which is film and television lighting technicians. I have my IATSE 33 card, which is predominantly theater and television in LA. Yeah, I think those are my IATSE union affiliation.
Okay. So I assume is there some sort of retirement through those a little bit?
There's pensions, there's life insurances, there's different levels.
Okay. All right. Okay. And then you mentioned investments. I was going to ask, outside of retirement, do you invest, or is it all sort of? I
have a portfolio of stocks, Bitcoin, which has been on a tear. But so there's market annuities as well. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Do you give to charity, or do you give back to the universe in any way?
Not enough. There are a handful of charities that I donate to on an annual basis. And then, I definitely go down the Instagram rabbit hole when you see friends and entertainment community, and ideas of giving back. In that essence, I'm a sucker for a good, Instagram rabbit hole of friends and whatnot, and GoFundMe's and all of those types of things.
Yep, same. I know
it's charitable, and
it's so weird to me. It's not weird, but it's like you see I see, there's certain words that you just associate with. So you're like Stagehand or IATSE or something, and you see it. And I'm the same way. It like triggers you. And it's like, I don't know this person. Like they're a stagehand in Florida that I've never met, but I relate to it because they're part of the entertainment community.
Yeah, I want to say about 6-8 months ago, we had a IATSE 728 brother who fell out of the grid at Radford Studios and fell to his death. And he has 2 young children, and obviously there was a big effort to help that family and everything else. And those I almost don't even consider those charities.
Correct.
In a sense that it's just, that's our community that we're just helping.
Yep.
So I don't necessarily look at it as that essence, but, I'm a big supporter of Midnight Mission, in LA, to help the homeless and whatnot communities. And, it's easier to write a check than it is to actually go donate your time. And that's something that I've always tried to make more of an effort in, to donate more of my time and energy as opposed to just writing a check. It's easy to write a check because that gets rid of your guilt.
Right. Well, and in our industry, I feel like we're so busy. It's like there are people that do donate their time more than me, and I see it, and I'm like, how do you do it?
We all set our priorities differently, and there's a fair amount of guilt that I carry that I don't set that I think there's better uses of my priorities that I'm not.
Yeah.
God forbid I should not stay out until 7 a.m.
It's LDI. It's an exception. But I did just interview Don Holder, and he was saying, I'm a volunteer EMT and a volunteer firefighter. And I was like, what the?
That's amazing. That's amazing.
But he said,
that makes me feel like a total bastard for not putting that time in.
But he said, but let me be clear. He goes, the first 20, 30 years of my career, I was working and did not have time for that. So he was very clear about that. Because I was just like, how do you, anyway.
And Don Holder's an industry icon. Like he's one of those, amazing designers that in the theater community that everybody knows and appreciates. And that just, I hate to hear that he's actually a really good guy.
I know, right? It makes you mad.
It makes me feel like such a dick for not spending more time and effort. But I guess that's what it is.
Well, we don't know. He could be a volunteer firefighter, show up and actually like cause more fire. So we don't know that he's actually helping.
You should spread that rumor.
Yeah. And like he's an EMT. Like, has somebody died in the ambulance on the way to the hospital with him in there?
I know. I mean, he was driving the ambulance and miraculously that cat just ended up under the wheel. So I'm not gonna
Amazing. All right. So on that note, I'm going to head to the wrap up here. Regarding finances, what advice would you give somebody who is starting their career now, and maybe somebody that wants to be a TV lighting designer?
At minimum, I think whatever the minimum is for now for an IRA, if you can in your 20s start putting $5,000-$6,000 a year away, learn what compounding investment means.
Yep.
So when if you can manage to get a good IRA, and when you're young, have it be a higher risk investment and watch it grow, and you'll realize that a little bit every year really does add up to a thing that if I had an extra 10, 15 year jumpstart to my investments, I certainly would be in a much better position than I am today. Start early and make it a priority. No one teaches you that. And if I at 18, 19 had started putting away whatever the maximum IRA contribution is, Roth IRA contribution, then I think you could all of a sudden, by the time you're 40, you'll have a pretty great nest egg.
Yeah. Okay. Listen to that, everybody.
Start early. Start early.
Episode 175 with Travis McHale, we went through compound interest and investing, and Travis is 40, and so I started the chart at 40, which you might think is that's too late, but 40, there's a track in which he could get to $1 million saved at 70 by starting at 40. So what you're saying is if you start at 20,
you start
30, 45, 50,
you'd be $2 million by 70. Like you just, and again, I think that's a good thing. Like you're starting at 40, just start. No matter where you are, just start putting that money into something. Really, you think about $5,000, that's a handful of bar visits that just, stay home. Make
skip it, LDI one year.
Make it a priority. Make it a situation, because I think financial independence is a situation that we should all strive for. Having a nest egg so that you're not stressed that you get hurt or it takes you out of work for 3 months or whatever it is. Having that nest egg and having that ability to plan ahead for the unknown. Do it early. Do it as early and as often as you can. Like just start at any point in your life. Make it a priority.
Yeah. This is actually good for me to hear too, because after COVID, I stopped all my I had everything like automated, right? Mm-hmm. And then I stopped that. So now I'm responsible to like put it in the retirement or whatever. And I just have to remember to do that. Okay, thanks.
Yeah,
thanks for the reminder, Josh.
And whatever it is, I mean, what does it cost? What's a theory of investment?
Dollar cost averaging,
right? Just $200 a week, $200 a month. Put it into something and just have it come out of your account. You won't even notice it. Just do it, and all of a sudden you look at the account and go, "Oh,
yep,
look, that's a down payment on a house."
Exactly. Okay, all right. Last question here. Where can people connect with you, and who do you want to connect with you? If you want anybody connecting with you,
well, anybody can connect. Again, I think this is a relationship business. I have a website, illuminationadvocates.com.
Amazing. Okay, Josh, this was awesome. Thank you for getting up early and getting away from the show floor. This is awesome. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
That's it for this week's episode. My takeaways are what Josh said about a good thing to do, and that was talking to good financial professionals who do it for a living. We all do lighting. We know lighting. We can do that well. We don't necessarily know the financial things, and so talking with good financial professionals is always a great thing. The bad thing, not having a financial plan. And this goes back to sort of like writing things down. How do you know if you're doing well or not doing well? You can just sort of know it innately, or you can write it down and then okay, this is where I need to get to, or this is what I should work toward. Or if you don't make it, you at least know what you were trying for. So let's listen to Josh here and make a financial life plan. Also, Josh said work begets work. That's something that comes up on almost every episode. And that's just a reminder to anybody needing work, go out and do more work. And finally, Josh said, learn about compound investing. Now, episode 53, compound investing with Paddy Hirsch, we discussed that entirely. We also discussed it more recently in our episode with Travis McHale, which is episode 175. So check out either of those episodes if you're interested in learning more about that. And I highly recommend it, whether you just Google it or listen back. Compound interest is so important. Thank you to Josh for showing up early at the convention and chatting with me. I just loved this discussion. I found it fascinating, and Josh is a very interesting person. So I hope you enjoyed the interview too. A big thank you to Ellen at LDI for giving us the podcast studio to record in. If you're enjoying this conversation and you want to help me keep having more of them, please check out our Patreon at patreon.com/artisticfinance. Your support goes directly toward keeping this podcast alive and growing. And most importantly, in this moment for me, it retroactively helps me pay for my trip to LDI. And speaking of patrons, I want to thank again patron Sylvie Scowcroft, who emailed me this week, and she let me know the ins and outs of 529 plans in Missouri. Now, Sylvie is a financial professional. She's not in Missouri, but she gave advice on how to proceed with Theo's 529 plan here in the state of Missouri. The long and short of it being, in Missouri, you get a tax deduction for any contribution to a 529 plan. So I don't actually have to put it in the Missouri 529 plan, which I don't want to because the website is a bit clunky. Now, I missed that for last year, but that's okay because we contributed to the Arizona 529 plan, which we were there for half the year. Now, this year, I know that I can actually continue to contribute to the Arizona plan if I want. And I'm not going to get the Arizona tax break there because we're not going to have income there, but I will get the same tax break here in Missouri for contributing to that plan. Or I have the option that I can just open a separate 529 plan if I want to choose different investments, but I frankly prefer having less accounts. So I bet we will probably just keep contributing to the Arizona 529 plan. But enough about that. You probably don't care if you're not living in Missouri or Arizona. But I do want to thank a new patron, Ryan Terry. He joined us a week ago or so. I still need to send him a thank you note to say thank you for being a patron. I also don't want to dox him, but I might be in his neck of the woods soon enough, and maybe I can see if we can meet up or something. But anyway, thank you to Sylvie and thank you to Ryan for supporting me and the show. And now just a couple updates on my life that are neither here nor there. So Nicole and I got back from vacation yesterday, and that's why I'm a little late getting this episode out. But I just have to say vacations are amazing. Like, we didn't do anything. We just hung out at the pool and the beach, and we mostly stayed off our laptops because that American work ethic can't quite be squashed even when you're on vacation. But it was so amazing. Theo didn't play with his pool toys or his floaties at all. But there were these rocks at the bases of the trees, and he just took the rocks and put them in the pool. And then we would pull them out, and then he would put them back in. And that's what we did all week. And then on the beach, all he wanted to do was play with the seaweed that was sort of washed up on the shore. But anyway, it was great. It was amazing. He's such a cutie, and we were able to have cocktails in our hands half the time. So it was amazing. And then at the end of it, the weirdest thing happened. So Nicole and I are just notorious for not talking to people on planes. Like, we just don't want to talk to people. We'll be polite and we'll help people get their bags down or et cetera, but we don't look for having conversation. So in the 11 years we've been married and we've been traveling together, there was only one time I can remember that we actually had a conversation with somebody on the plane. And I guess they were just super chatty. And then actually at that time, I was having really bad ear issues. And so I think masking my ear pain to the stranger next to me because, I don't want them to think I'm getting sick or something. I think because of that, we had a full-blown conversation. I don't know how that works. But anyway, we landed in St. Louis yesterday. And because Theo is almost 2 years old and he's a toddler, we are semi-required to talk to people on planes now. And this time it was because as we're waiting to get off the plane, he decided to go into the aisle and then try to unzip somebody's bag. And the lady was very nice. And she starts talking about how she has 2 kids and they're grown now. And so while she's talking, I'm giving Theo his activity book to distract him from unzipping her bag. And it has a whole bunch of buttons, and zippers and things. She mentioned that her son is now a grown up button pusher. He loved pushing buttons when he was young, and he loves pushing them now. Now, that's just a funny turn of phrase. So I say, well, what kind of buttons is he pushing? And it turns out that he works for Christy Lights. He's a touring LD for concerts, and he got an MFA in lighting. I'm not going to give more details because I don't want to dox him, but it was just so strange. And what I loved about it is that his mom knew all of the lighting companies, all these lighting terms, these names. It was pretty amazing. Because I even said, well, does he go to LDI? And she said, oh, yes. And I just think that's funny because I don't think my parents know what LDI is. They've heard the phrase, but I don't think they would remember it. So anyway, that was cool. And then in a similar vein, and I'm going to put a link for this in the show notes. So the lighting professor at ASU, who's Nate Wheatley, he sent me a video clip of a comedian, and her name is Jessica Curson. Now, in this clip, she's in a comedy club and she's standing in front of a brick wall. You've seen these videos, comedians in clubs. And she asked somebody in the audience what they do for a living. And they say they teach college theater. And then later we learn that they teach theater lighting, which again, what are the odds? So I think here's what I think the odds are. There's a maximum of 400 college lighting professors in the USA. I'm making that number assumption because there are 190 NAST accredited theater programs. And so I figure there's another 190 theater programs that aren't accredited. So that makes 380, and I'm going to round that to 400. So one of these 400 lighting professors in the USA got singled out at a comedy show. I find that just amazing. So if that was you that got singled out, or if you know who they're referring to in the video, because the person's not on camera, they're like in the audience somewhere, just let me know because I am so curious. Like, surely we know this person, right? Surely one of us listening or me knows this person. So if you're a lighting designer that frequents comedy clubs and you got called out, let me know. Okay, now last week I mentioned a load-in going on in Mesa, Arizona. Now, the house has an inventory of 42 Lecos, of which I'm using 14, and they didn't have any lamps. Now, I know you were all worried, but here's the deal. They have now purchased 14 lamps. They actually purchased 17 so that we have 3 spares. And they have arrived. They're somewhere in the building, and we're going to drop them tomorrow as we focus. So crisis averted. I just love that they didn't buy 42 lamps for their 42 lights, but just the 14 that we need. Anyway, I'm excited about that load in because I haven't been back to Phoenix since I was teaching there. And so I'm going there this week and I'm going to see my former students and all the former faculty and staff. And I'm excited about it. And now the dad joke to end the episode is actually borrowed from our friends over at the Light Talk podcast. And side note here, so we have about 100 weekly listeners, 100 to 200, depending on the week. They have, I think, 1,000 weekly listeners. Anyway, so I have an unofficial competition with them to get more Apple Podcast reviews. So if you haven't left us an Apple Podcast review or on Spotify, you can do it there too. Head over to Artistic Finance Podcast on Apple and leave us a review. And also, don't leave one for Light Talk and don't let them know that this is a competition because that's the only way I'm going to get ahead of them is if they don't know that it's a competition. But anyway, in their episode 380, they discussed the late Bill Klages, who they refer to as the god of lighting. Now, Bill was an American lighting designer born in 1927 and had a very long career. And by the time he retired, he had been nominated for 20 Primetime Emmy Awards, of which he was awarded 7. And he is also the only lighting designer to be inducted into the Television Hall of Fame, and that happened back in 2012. If you're interested in remembering or learning about Bill, definitely check out that episode. 3 lighting designers come together, John Gresh, Jeff Ravitz, and Dennis Size. They all sit down and talk about Bill's life and career. Now, Dennis said a very funny joke, and I thought it was so good because it was not only funny, but it was also poignant. And I've been waiting for an interview with a television lighting designer because I think it relates more. And so I'm going to end today's episode with it. When God said, "Let there be light," Bill Klages said, And what intensity would you like it at, sir? That's it for today. Until next time, break a leg.
Thank you for listening to Artistic Finance, where we interview successful artists, leaders, and investors to help educate and inspire the creative community. To access our show notes and resources, go to artisticfinance.com. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Before making any decision, consult a professional. This show is copyrighted by Artistic Finance. Written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.